Okay, let's just jump right in. Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into some telemetry data that honestly completely blew my mind. We are talking about a fundamental rewrite of the biology rulebook. We're looking at records from a super-terrestrial exoplanet called Tartarus 9, and what astrobiologists found there? It totally defies our basic understanding of what life actually is. We're not talking about weird little microbes swimming in a salty ocean here. No, we are talking about an aggressively metallic world where life emerged from literal pools of liquid metal.
For centuries, we've just kind of assumed life needs carbon as a backbone and water as a base solvent. But what if it doesn't? The data we're looking at comes from astrobiologist Dr. Elias Thorne, who was surveying Tartarus 9 from orbit. Now, this planet is tidally locked, meaning one side is a blistering desert, the other side is a frozen wasteland. But Thorne focused on the terminator line, that little twilight strip right in the middle where the temperature sits at a really comfortable 35 degrees Celsius. And that's where he spotted these strange, highly reflective pools of elemental gallium. But the crazy part wasn't the liquid metal itself, it was the thermal imaging. These pools were actually generating their own heat.
Things got really weird when the ship's AI flagged the area with a chillingly simple observation. Puddles do not intentionally migrate uphill. Yeah, the real shock came when Dr. Thorne reviewed a time-lapse. Over 12 hours, a pool of liquid gallium started to quiver, and then it extended these amoeboid, silvery tendrils, pseudopods, reaching out, grabbing the rocky surface, and deliberately hauling its entire mass up the side of a crater. It even had these shimmering, microscopic geometric ridges. It wasn't gravity, it wasn't magnets. This was a living organism actively crawling toward a rock outcropping.
To really wrap our heads around how alien this is, we have to look at our own biology. On Earth, life uses water as a solvent and relies on chemical neurotransmitters and carbon DNA. Tartarus 9? Totally different. They swap out water and carbon for highly conductive liquid gallium, and instead of chemicals, their cellular machinery is made of floating gallium arsenide crystals. They literally communicate using microscopic flashes of light. It's basically an organic liquid metal quantum computer.
Now, you're probably wondering, how on earth do they pull this off without instantly short-circuiting? Because liquid metal should just dissipate an electrical charge and kill the organism, right? Well, these creatures, Dr. Thorne dubbed them the silvers, evolved an incredibly elegant workaround. Think of them like giant colonial slime molds made up of billions of tiny droplets. Each little droplet of liquid gallium cytoplasm is wrapped in a super flexible, atomically thin membrane of gallium oxide and silicon. That tiny skin acts as a perfect insulator, holding the liquid metal inside while protecting all those internal crystals from shorting out.
And inside those insulated little droplets are crystals of gallium arsenide and gallium nitride. If you're a tech nerd, those probably sound familiar because they're the exact semiconductors we use here on Earth to make microchips and LEDs. Because these compounds have what's called a direct band gap, running a current through them makes them emit photons. So the silvers don't use chemicals like dopamine to think. They use highly synchronized microscopic flashes of infrared, visible red, and ultraviolet light firing between their crystals. They quite literally think in light. How cool is that?
But this brings up a massive question. How does a liquid metal organism actually get the energy to survive? I mean, we use sunlight or eat food for chemical energy, right? This glowing optoelectronic nervous system still needs to plug in somewhere. Well, Dr. Thorne actually watched a silver hunt, and he witnessed this incredibly violent galvanic feeding process that's going to completely change how you view metabolism.
To understand it, we need to talk about liquid metal embrittlement. It's this fascinating and honestly pretty destructive metallurgical phenomenon. See, liquid gallium has a huge affinity for certain solid metals, like aluminum. When they touch, the gallium atoms rapidly diffuse straight into the solid metal's crystal lattice, attacking the grain boundaries. It physically rips the atomic structure apart from the inside out. It can turn a solid block of metal into a brittle, flaky mush in just hours.
So, here is how the silvers use that to feed. Step 1, the creature spots an aluminum and zinc boulder, flattens out and completely hugs the rock to maximize its surface area. Step 2, embrittlement time. It infiltrates the rock, breaking that solid aluminum down into a high surface area mush. And finally, step 3, it exposes that raw, unoxidized mush to the trace carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide in the planet's atmosphere. Boom! A violent oxidation reaction occurs, releasing heat and free electrons, which the creature then happily harvests to power its internal crystals.
The visual result of this is just stunning. As the creature absorbs that chemical potential energy, its internal nervous system charges up, and you start seeing these faint, bioluminescent pulses of violet and blue light rippling across the silver mass. You can see it shining right through that semi-transparent skin.
It's like alien poetry. The organism breathes in metal and breathes out light.
Okay, next up, the freezing threat, the aphelion of Tartarus 9. Right, so things weren't always peaceful. As the planet reached its furthest point from its star, aphelion, a catastrophic threat emerged. Tartarus 9 might be tidally locked, but its orbit is elliptical, meaning solar radiation was about to plummet. The Silvers were facing their ultimate test. See, pure elemental gallium has a very specific, unusually low freezing point, 29.76 degrees Celsius. That's why a piece of gallium will literally melt in your hand. The Silvers loved the 35-degree twilight zone. It kept them perfectly fluid.
But Dr. Thorne's climate models showed a severe winter coming. Within just 48 hours, the temperature in the Terminator zone was projected to drop from a balmy 35 degrees all the way down to a frigid 10 degrees Celsius. That is way below gallium's freezing point. The entire ecosystem was about to solidify.
And freezing wouldn't just slow them down, it would utterly destroy them. Gallium is super weird. Kind of like water, it's one of the few things in the universe that actually expands when it freezes, by about 3.1% in volume. Think about frostbite on Earth. Freezing water expands and ruptures our cells. If the Silvers froze, their liquid interiors would crystallize, expand, and literally shatter those delicate oxide membranes, crushing all their internal semiconductors. It would be a complete mass extinction event.
So what do? Well, as the temperature dipped toward 25 degrees, Thorne watched something incredible. They stopped hunting. Grazing just ceased entirely. And then, a massive, brilliant flash of deep red light rippled across the valley. It was a coordinated chemical signal. Moving in total unison, the organisms began this desperate migration toward very specific geological rock formations.
But they weren't going after aluminum this time. They swarmed rocks that were super rich in two specific elements, indium and tin. And rather than oxidizing them for energy, the Silvers used their embrittlement trick to violently tear these minerals apart and pulled the raw elemental indium and tin straight into their liquid bodies. They were literally absorbing the metal whole.
What they were doing was absolute genius. It was internal alchemy. By mixing precise ratios of indium and tin into their pure gallium bodies, they were actively changing their own material properties. They created an internal eutectic alloy. By mixing 68% gallium, 22% indium, and 10% tin, they transformed their blood into a substance known as gallinstan. This was evolution in overdrive.
And the reason they did this, gallinstan does not freeze at 29 degrees. By alloying themselves, the Silvers plummeted their freezing point down to an incredible negative 19 degrees Celsius. They essentially whipped up a biological antifreeze purely out of metallurgy. By completely changing their own elemental makeup, they saved themselves from shattering in the harsh planetary winter.
So, as the freezing winds hit the twilight zone, the Silvers didn't shatter. The heavier metals did make them sluggish, and it slowed down their internal firings, shifting those brilliant blue and violet flashes into a narrow, pulsing crimson light. They huddled together, merging their membranes to share heat and electrical energy, essentially forming one massive glowing red hibernation network, just resting quietly, waiting for spring.
As Dr. Thorne wrapped up his final report, he wrote down something that I think perfectly sums this all up. He said, "We came looking for life as we know it. We found life as it must be. The creatures of Tartarus 9 are born of silver, powered by fire, and they think in light." I mean, it just proves that life isn't some rigid recipe of carbon and water. It's a localized rebellion against entropy using literally whatever tools the periodic table throws at it. And I'm going to leave you with that awe-inspiring question. If an entire ecosystem can build a nervous system out of smartphone semiconductors, literally eat by ripping metal apart at the atomic level, and survive winter through internal alchemy, what other unimaginable biochemistries are waiting out there in the dark void of space?
Please like and subscribe.